On my 35th birthday, I woke up alone. The bed beside me was cold, sheets untouched. David hadn't come home again. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, counting the rotations like I used to count the days until things would get better. 312, 313. I'd stopped believing in better somewhere around day 2000. I got up, showered, and put on the blue dress I'd bought specifically for today. It was nothing fancy, just a simple cotton thing with small white flowers, but it made me feel pretty. Or at least, it used to. Now, I wasn't sure anything could make me feel pretty anymore. Not after 3 years of David looking through me like I was furniture. Expensive furniture he regretted buying. The kitchen was quiet. I made coffee and sat at the table watching the morning light stretch across the floor. 35. When I was 25, I thought 35 would look different. I thought I'd have children by now, maybe 2. A boy and a girl. I thought David and I would be that couple. The one that slow dances in the kitchen, that finishes each other's sentences, that grows old together, holding hands. Instead, I had an empty house that technically wasn't empty because it was full of his things, his preferences, his rules, the white couch he insisted on, the modern art he picked because it was sophisticated, the silence he cultivated because my voice apparently gave him headaches. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Karen. "Happy birthday, Maggie. Dinner tonight, just us girls?" I smiled, the first real smile of the day. Karen had been my rock through everything. She was the only one who knew how bad things had gotten with David. The only one I trusted with the truth. "Can't wait," I typed back. "Pick me up at 7? Done. Wear something that makes you feel like a queen. You deserve it." I set the phone down and took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter. I'd forgotten the sugar. Story of my life lately, forgetting the small things that made bitter things bearable. The front door opened. I straightened in my chair, suddenly aware of how I must look. Hair still damp, no makeup, sitting alone in an empty kitchen on my birthday. David walked in, but he wasn't alone. Behind him was a woman I'd never seen before. Blonde, young, maybe 25, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been disappointed by life. "Margaret," David said. Not Maggie. He only called me Margaret when he was about to say something cruel. "This is Tanya." "Hi," Tanya said, but she didn't look at me. She was looking around the house, appraising it, pricing it. "Nice place." I stood up slowly. "David, what's going on?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. I watched, confused, as he extracted a single bill. $100. He held it up between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "I want you out," he said. "Today." The words didn't make sense at first. They rattled around in my head like loose change. What? Out. Gone. This house is for Tanya now. She's moving in. He threw the bill at me. It fluttered down and landed on the floor at my feet, lying there like an insult made of paper. That should cover a few nights at a motel until you figure out your pathetic life. I stared at the $100 bill. I stared at Tanya, who was already walking through the living room, running her fingers along the white couch. I stared at David, at the man I'd loved for 12 years, married for 10, and I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. I'd been heartbroken so many times in this marriage that my heart had developed scar tissue. No, this was something different. This was clarity. Cold, sharp, surgical clarity. "You're serious," I said. "Dead serious. I've been wanting to do this for months. Consider this your birthday present, the gift of freedom." He laughed at his own joke. Tanya laughed too. That high, tinkling laugh of someone who doesn't realize she's next in line for the same treatment. I bent down and picked up the $100 bill. I folded it carefully, precisely, and tucked it into the pocket of my blue dress with the white flowers. "Thank you," I said. David's smirk faltered. "Thank you? For making this easy." I walked past him, past Tanya, who was now examining the kitchen appliances, and went to the bedroom, my bedroom. The bedroom I'd slept in alone for 3 years, while my husband found reasons to stay out late, work weekends, travel for business. I opened the closet and reached behind the row of his suits. Suits I'd picked out, suits I'd had dry cleaned, suits I'd hung up with care even when he couldn't be bothered to say thank you, and pulled out a shoebox. Inside the shoebox was an envelope, sealed. I'd prepared it 3 weeks ago when I finally admitted to myself that this day was coming. Not this exact day, not my birthday, but a day like this. A day when David's cruelty would finally overflow the container I'd built to hold it. I walked back to the kitchen. David was pouring himself a drink, my good whiskey, the bottle I'd saved from my grandmother's estate. Tanya was sitting on the counter, swinging her legs like a child. "Still here?" David said without turning around. "I thought I made myself clear." "You did." I held out the envelope. "But I have something for you first." He turned, annoyed. "What is that?" "Open it." "I don't want—" "Open it, David." Something in my voice made him stop, made him look at me, really look at me, for the first time in years. He set down the whiskey and took the envelope. I watched his face as he broke the seal, as he unfolded the papers inside, as his eyes scanned the words. The color drained from his face. "What?" He looked up at me, then back at the papers. "This can't be right." "It's right." "But the house? I thought my name is on the mortgage." "Your name is on the mortgage because the bank required 2 incomes to qualify. But the house was purchased with money from my grandmother's trust. Money that was mine before we got married. Money that, according to our prenuptial agreement, the one you insisted on, if you remember, remains mine in the event of divorce." I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 3 years preparing for a war she hoped would never come. "This house belongs to me, David. It always has." Tanya slid off the counter. "Wait, what? David, you said this was your house." "It is my house," David snapped, but his voice cracked. He was reading the documents again, searching for a loophole, a mistake, anything. "This has to be fake. You forged this." "Call your lawyer," I said. "Call anyone you want. I've had these documents verified by 3 separate attorneys. The house is mine. The furniture is mine. The whiskey you're drinking is mine." I plucked the glass from his hand and took a sip. It was smooth. Grandmother always had good taste. "You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live." David's face cycled through shock, denial, or rage, and finally landed on something that looked almost like fear. "You can't do this." "I can. I am." I set down the glass and walked toward the door. "I'm going to spend my birthday with my sister. When I get back tonight, I expect you to be in the guest room. Tomorrow, we can discuss the details of your departure like adults. Or you can throw another $100 bill at me and see how that goes." I opened the door and paused, looking back at Tanya. She was staring at David like she'd never seen him before, like she was seeing, for the first time, the man behind the charm. "Tanya," I said, "a word of advice. When a man tells you his wife is crazy, ask yourself why he's still married to her. And when he tells you his house is his, ask to see the deed." I walked out into the morning sunshine. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I was smiling. 35 years old. And for the first time in a decade, I felt alive. Karen's car was already in the driveway. She must have sensed something was wrong because she was out of the driver's seat before I reached the curb. "Maggie? What happened? You look—" She stopped, studied my face. "You look incredible, actually. What's going on?" "I'll tell you everything over breakfast," I said, climbing into the passenger seat. "But first, I need you to know something." "What?" I pulled the $100 bill from my pocket and held it up. "David gave me a birthday present." Karen stared at the bill, then at me. "He gave you $100? He threw it at my feet and told me to get out. The house is for his girlfriend now." Karen's face went through its own cycle of emotions, confusion, understanding, fury. "That son of a— I'm going back in there. I'm going to— No." I put my hand on her arm. "You're going to drive. And I'm going to tell you about the envelope I've been keeping in the closet for 3 weeks." Karen looked at me. Really looked at me. The way David hadn't in years. Maggie, what did you do? I buckled my seatbelt and leaned back in the seat. The morning sun was warm on my face. I could still feel the shake in my hands, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. But beneath it all was something solid, something certain. I reminded him whose name is on the deed. Karen let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Oh my God. The grandmother trust? You finally used it? He didn't leave me a choice. Karen started the car, but she didn't put it in gear yet. She sat there, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. All those years, I watched him chip away at you, piece by piece. And you just smiled and took it, and I thought he'd broken you? He almost did. But you were planning. This whole time you were planning. I thought about the past 3 years. The late nights researching property law, the secret consultations with divorce attorneys, the careful, meticulous documentation of every financial transaction, every cruel word, every broken promise. I'd built my case like a castle, brick by brick, in the silence of my own mind. I was surviving, I said. That's all. Just surviving. But then, about 3 weeks ago, I overheard him on the phone with Tanya. He was telling her about his plan, how he was going to kick me out on my birthday because he thought it would be poetic, how he was going to give me $100 because that's all I was worth to him. And you didn't say anything? I said something. I said it in a letter, a very detailed letter with attachments. I smiled again, and this time it felt almost real. I figured he'd want to read it eventually. Karen finally put the car in gear. Where do you want to go? Somewhere with pancakes and champagne. It's 9 a.m. I just took back my house from my cheating husband on my 35th birthday. I think I've earned morning champagne. Karen laughed. A real laugh, surprised and delighted. God, I've missed you. I've missed this version of you. I've missed her too. We drove through the neighborhood, past the perfect houses with the perfect lawns, past the families loading into minivans for Saturday activities, past the life I thought I wanted but never actually had. I watched it all slide by and felt nothing but relief. My phone buzzed. A text from David. We need to talk. Call me. I deleted it without responding. Another buzz. Margaret, this is serious. You can't just do this. Delete. Another. I'm calling my lawyer. You're going to regret this. I typed back a single word, Mom, good. Then I turned off my phone and dropped it in my purse. Karen glanced over. Trouble already? Nothing I didn't expect. He's threatening lawyers. Let him. You've had 3 years to prepare. What's he got? Charm. Rage. A girlfriend who just realized she bet on the wrong horse. Karen snorted. That poor girl has no idea what she got herself into. I thought about Tanya, about the way she'd looked at the house like it was already hers, about the way she'd looked at David when she realized it wasn't. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. Bone deep, soul-weary tired. I don't hate her, I said quietly. I should, probably, but I don't. She's just another woman who believed his lies. You're a better person than me. I hate her plenty. She'll figure it out. They always do. We found a diner that served breakfast all day, tucked into a booth in the back, and ordered pancakes and mimosas. The champagne was cheap and the orange juice was from concentrate, but it tasted like victory. Okay, Karen said, leaning forward. Tell me everything, from the beginning. So I did. I told her about the night, 3 years ago, when I first found the texts on David's phone. The ones from someone named T, that were definitely not about business. I told her about confronting him, about his denials, about the way he turned it around on me. I was paranoid. I was jealous. I was pushing him away with my constant suspicion. I told her about the couple's therapy that lasted exactly 2 sessions before David declared the therapist was biased against men and refused to go back. About the way he started sleeping in the guest room for his back and never slept in our bed again. About the slow, systematic way he withdrew all affection, all conversation, all acknowledgement of my existence. I became invisible, I said. In my own home, in my own marriage, I was invisible. He'd walk past me in the hallway like I was a piece of furniture. He'd answer my questions with grunts. He'd leave for days at a time and not even bother to lie about where he'd been. Karen's hands were tight around her mimosa glass. Why didn't you tell me? All this time, I thought things were bad, but I didn't know. I was ashamed. I thought it was my fault. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was prettier, if I was more interesting, if I was less needy, less emotional, less... I stopped, took a breath. He had me convinced I was the problem. That's what he does. That's his talent. He makes you believe that everything wrong in the relationship is your fault. And if you could just fix yourself, he'd love you again. But he was cheating the whole time. Probably longer. I don't know for sure when it started. And honestly, I don't care anymore. The when doesn't matter. The what matters. And what he did was destroy me piece by piece, while making me thank him for the privilege. Karen reached across the table and took my hand. You're not destroyed. Look at you. You just evicted that man from your own house. I know. I squeezed her hand. I know. But it took me so long to get here. 3 years of planning, of saving, of building up the courage to actually do something. 3 years of lying in bed at night, wondering if I was crazy, if he was right, if I really was the monster he said I was. You're not crazy. You've never been crazy. I know that now, but there were times, dark times, when I wasn't sure. The pancakes arrived. We ate in silence for a while, processing everything. The diner was starting to fill up with the late morning brunch crowd, families with children, couples on dates, groups of friends catching up, normal people living normal lives. I wondered how many of them were hiding their own secrets, their own pain, their own carefully maintained facades. So what happens now? Karen asked. Now I go home, and David goes through the 5 stages of grief about losing his house, and probably his girlfriend, and definitely his sense of superiority. And then? Divorce, obviously. I pushed a piece of pancake through a puddle of syrup. I should have done it years ago. I don't know why I didn't. Because you loved him. Because you hoped things would change. Because leaving is harder than staying, even when staying is killing you. All of the above. My phone was still off, but I could imagine it filling up with messages. David's threats, his pleas, his manipulations. I'd seen all his tricks before. The rage when control slipped away. The sudden tenderness when he realized rage wasn't working. The gaslighting, the accusations, the tears that appeared just when he needed them. He's going to make this ugly, I said. You know that, right? Let him try. You've got documentation. You've got lawyers. You've got me. He'll tell everyone I'm the villain. That I kicked him out, that I'm vindictive, that I destroyed our marriage. People who matter will know the truth. People who don't matter, Karen shrugged. Their opinions don't pay your bills. I laughed despite myself. When did you get so wise? I've been watching you survive that man for 10 years. I've learned a lot about what not to do. We finished our pancakes, paid the bill, and stepped out into the late morning sunshine. The day stretched ahead of us, blank and full of possibility. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that way about a day. What do you want to do now? Karen asked. I want to walk, just walk, and breathe, and not have to account for my time to anyone. That sounds perfect. We walked through the downtown area, past shops and cafes, and people going about their lives. Karen talked about her work, about her kids, about the mundane details of existence that had once seemed so boring but now felt precious. Normal. Peaceful. I listened and nodded and contributed where I could. But part of my mind was still back at the house. Still seeing David's face when he read those papers. Still feeling the weight of the $100 bill in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at it. $100. That's what he thought I was worth. 10 years of marriage, of cooking his meals, of cleaning his house, of supporting his career, of enduring his cruelty. All of it reduced to a single bill thrown at my feet. What are you going to do with that? Karen asked. Frame it? What? I'm going to frame it and hang it in my office, as a reminder. A reminder of what? Of what I survived, of what I'm worth, of the fact that he thought he could buy me off for $100, and instead he lost everything. Karen shook her head slowly. You really have changed. No, I've just remembered who I was before him. We walked until my feet hurt, until the sun was high overhead, until the mimosas wore off, and I was left with just myself and the truth. Then Karen drove me home. The house looked the same as it had that morning, but I saw it differently now. It wasn't David's house that I was borrowing. It was my house that he had occupied. My grandmother's gift to me, her way of ensuring I'd always have a place of my own. She'd never liked David. She'd told me so exactly once at our wedding, with the particular bluntness of very old women who have earned the right to speak truth. That man has cold eyes, she'd said. You watch yourself with him. I hadn't listened. I was in love. I was 25 and certain I knew everything, especially about my own heart. Grandma Ruth had died 2 years later, and her money had bought this house. And I'd spent the next 8 years trying to prove her wrong about David, trying to prove that love could warm cold eyes, that patience could soften a hard heart, that devotion could earn devotion in return. I walked in the front door to find David sitting on the white couch, alone. Tanya was nowhere to be seen. We need to talk, he said. I set down my purse. Where's your girlfriend? She left. He ran a hand through his hair. That's not important. What's important is this insane claim that the house is yours. It's not a claim. It's a fact. Margaret, be reasonable. We've been married for 10 years. Whatever assets we came into the marriage with, they're marital property now. Any judge will see. No. I sat down in the chair across from him. They won't, because we signed a prenuptial agreement. Your prenuptial agreement, if you recall. The one that said any assets acquired before marriage would remain separate property in the event of divorce. The one you insisted on because you were so sure you had more to protect than I did. David's jaw tightened. That prenup was about my family's business interests. It was about protecting assets from a spouse. Congratulations, David. It works both ways. I'm not going to let you do this. You don't have a choice. He stood up abruptly, and for a moment I thought he might hit me. I'd thought that many times over the years, but he never had. His abuse was subtler than that, quieter, more insidious. I gave you everything, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I gave you this life. I gave you status. You gave me nothing. I stood up too, facing him. You gave me nothing but loneliness and self-doubt and the slow erosion of everything I used to be. You took and took and took, and you called it giving. But I'm done being fooled. I'm done being diminished. I'm done being invisible in my own home. This is my home too, for 2 more weeks. After that, you'll need to find somewhere else to be invisible. David stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, and maybe he was. Maybe the woman he'd married, the woman he'd broken down and rebuilt into something small and manageable, was gone. Maybe she'd died somewhere in those 3 years of planning and dreaming and waiting. And maybe in her place stood someone new, someone who remembered what it felt like to have a spine. I'm going to fight this, he said. I know. I'm going to make your life hell. You already did. This is just the sequel. He grabbed his keys from the table and stormed toward the door. Don't think this is over. I know it's not, but David? He stopped, hand on the doorknob. Happy birthday to me. The door slammed so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I listened to his car start, to the screech of tires as he peeled out of the driveway, to the silence that settled in his wake. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of my grandmother's whiskey, and raised it to the empty room. Thank you, Grandma Ruth. You were right about the cold eyes. My phone buzzed. Karen, how did it go? I typed back. He's gone. I'm still standing. Come over for dinner? Already on my way. Bringing wine. I set down the phone and looked around my house. My empty, quiet, peaceful house. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and arguments and all the ugliness David had promised. But tonight, I was going to celebrate. 35 years old, alone, terrified, free. It was the best birthday I'd ever had. The first 3 days after my birthday were almost peaceful. David came and went like a ghost, sleeping in the guest room, avoiding me with the same dedication he'd once used to avoid responsibility. Tanya hadn't reappeared, and I didn't ask where she'd gone. I didn't care. I was too busy meeting with lawyers, documenting assets, and beginning the long process of untangling 10 years of marriage. My attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, had reviewed all my documentation and pronounced it airtight. "He doesn't have a case," she said during our second meeting. "The prenup is ironclad. The property deed is clear. The only thing he can do is delay, and even that will cost him more than it costs you." "He'll delay," I said. "He's petty like that. Let him. Time is on your side. The longer this drags out, the more he spends on legal fees, and from what you've told me about your finances, he doesn't have the resources to sustain a prolonged battle." "What about the joint accounts?" Patricia pulled out a folder. "I've already filed motions to freeze them pending the divorce settlement. He won't be able to touch that money without a judge's approval." I felt a knot in my chest loosen slightly. The money in those accounts wasn't much. David had always been better at spending than saving. But it was something, a buffer between me and the uncertain future. "What about the personal accounts?" I asked. "The ones in just his name?" Patricia's expression flickered. "That's where it gets complicated. Technically, anything earned during the marriage is marital property. But if he's been hiding money in accounts you don't know about..." "He has been." "You're sure?" "I'm not sure of anything, but I know David. He's been planning this for a while. He wouldn't have tried to kick me out unless he had a backup plan." Patricia made a note. "I'll reach out to some colleagues who specialize in forensic accounting. If there's hidden money, we'll find it." I left her office feeling cautiously optimistic. The legal machinery was in motion. David's threats were just noise. All I had to do was stay the course and wait. But then Tanya came back. I was in the kitchen making dinner, just pasta, nothing fancy. I'd stopped cooking elaborate meals years ago when David declared my food too heavy. When I heard the front door open, I assumed it was David, coming back from whatever hole he'd been hiding in all day. Instead, Tanya walked in. She was carrying a suitcase. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "You're still here." I set down the wooden spoon I'd been using to stir the sauce. "I live here. For now." She dragged the suitcase past me toward the stairs. "David said I could use the master bedroom since you've been sleeping in the guest room." I felt my blood pressure spike. "I have not been sleeping in the guest room. David has. And you are not moving into my bedroom." Tanya stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to face me. Up close, she looked younger than I'd first thought. Maybe 23, 24? Young enough to still believe that love conquered all, that the rules didn't apply to her, that she was different from all the other women David had undoubtedly used and discarded over the years. "Look," she said, her voice taking on a condescending tone that made my teeth clench, "I know this is hard for you, but David and I are together now. You need to accept that and move on." I've already moved on. What I haven't done is moved out, because this is my house. Tanya rolled her eyes. "David said you'd say that. He also said you're delusional and possibly having some kind of mental breakdown. Frankly, I can see what he means. The way you're looking at me right now is kind of scary." I took a deep breath, counted to 5. Reminded myself that assault charges would not help my divorce case. "Tanya, I'm going to say this once, so please listen carefully. This house belongs to me. I have the legal documents to prove it. David knows this. If he told you otherwise, he lied to you, which, if you knew him better, you'd realize is his default setting. He didn't lie. He said the whole thing is being contested." "Contested by whom? Him?" I laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. "He can contest all he wants. The facts don't change. The deed is in my name. The money used to purchase the house came from my inheritance. We signed a prenup protecting exactly this kind of asset. He has no claim here." Tanya's confidence wavered slightly. He said his lawyers will take his money and tell him what he wants to hear, for as long as he's willing to pay. But eventually, the money will run out, and the truth will still be the truth. The front door opened again. This time it was David, carrying takeout bags that smelled like Thai food. He stopped short when he saw us standing in the kitchen, facing off like two cats in an alley. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your girlfriend is trying to move into my bedroom," I said. "Our bedroom," David corrected. "And I told her she could use it since you've been so hostile lately. There's no reason we can't all be civilized about this." I stared at him, really stared at him, trying to find any trace of the man I'd married, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me, the man I'd believed in for a decade. There was nothing there, just cold eyes and a practiced smile. "Civilized," I repeated. "You threw $100 at me and told me to get out on my birthday. You moved your girlfriend into our house without my consent. You've been lying to her about the ownership of the property. And you want to talk about civilized? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about." David turned to Tanya with a long-suffering expression. "She's always like this, always making everything into a drama. I've been dealing with this for 10 years. "David," Tanya said slowly, "is the house really hers?" "It's complicated. Yes or no?" He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Tanya picked up her suitcase. "I'm going to go to my mom's for a few days. Call me when you figure out whatever this is." "Tanya, wait." But she was already out the door, suitcase rolling behind her, leaving David standing in the kitchen with his Thai food and his excuses. He turned on me. "Are you happy now?" "Delirious. You know what your problem is, Margaret. You never know when to quit. You always have to push and push until everyone around you is miserable. That's rich, coming from you." "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned back to my pasta. The sauce was starting to stick to the bottom of the pan. I stirred it mechanically, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much this was affecting me. "It means I'm done talking. You can eat your Thai food in the guest room. Try not to spill on my sheets." David stood there for a long moment, radiating fury. I could feel it on my back like heat from a fire. Then he stormed upstairs, each footstep a small earthquake, and slammed the guest room door so hard I heard something fall off a shelf. I ate my pasta alone at the kitchen table, just like I'd eaten most of my meals for the past 3 years. But tonight, the loneliness felt different. Not like a punishment, but like a promise. Soon, I wouldn't have to listen to him stomp around upstairs. Soon, I wouldn't have to brace myself every time I heard a door open. Soon, I'd be alone in the good way. The peaceful way, the way I chose. Karen called while I was washing dishes. "How's the cohabitation going?" "Tanya tried to move in today." "She what?" "David told her she could have the master bedroom because I've been so hostile." Karen made a sound that was half laugh, half screech. The audacity. The absolute audacity of that man. She left, though, after she figured out that he'd been lying about the house. Good. Maybe she's smarter than she looks. She's not dumb. She's just young. She believes what she wants to believe because reality is too ugly to accept. Sounds like someone else I know. I paused, dish in hand. "Are you comparing me to my husband's mistress?" "I'm saying you spent 10 years believing what you wanted to believe. The only difference is you eventually stopped." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. She was right. I'd been exactly like Tanya once, certain that love was enough, that David's cold moments were exceptions to his warm norm, that if I just tried hard enough, everything would be fine. "Do you think she'll come back?" Karen asked. "I don't know. Probably. Women like her don't give up easily. They see the relationship as a prize they've won, and they don't want to admit they've won something worthless." That's surprisingly insightful. I've had a lot of time to think about it. We talked for another hour about nothing and everything until I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I said goodnight, hung up, and went to bed. The master bedroom felt strange without David's presence. Not emptier. He hadn't slept there in years, but quieter. Like the room itself was exhaling, releasing tension it had held for so long. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke to raised voices. I pulled on a robe and padded downstairs to find David on the phone, pacing the living room like a caged animal. I don't care what the account says. That money is mine. I earned it. You need to... He stopped when he saw me, turning his back and lowering his voice. I'll call you back. Problem with the bank? I asked sweetly. None of your business. If it's the joint accounts, it is my business. Patricia filed to freeze them pending the divorce. David's face went red. You had no right. I have every right. Those are marital assets. They belong to both of us. I'm protecting my share. Your share, he laughed bitterly. You haven't worked a day in the last 8 years. What exactly did you contribute to those accounts? The words hit like a slap. I'd heard some version of them before. David loved to remind me that he was the breadwinner, that his career funded our lifestyle, that I should be grateful for everything he provided. For years, I'd believed him. I'd apologized for not earning, for needing, for existing in a space he'd designated for his generosity. Not anymore. I contributed 10 years of my life, I said calmly. I contributed meals and clean houses and organized calendars and social niceties and emotional labor and everything else that allowed you to focus on your precious career without having to worry about anything domestic. That has value, David. Just because you didn't write me a check doesn't mean I wasn't working. Cooking dinner isn't... Don't. I held up my hand. Don't finish that sentence, because if you do, I'm going to remind you of all the business dinners I hosted, all the clients' spouses I entertained, all the times you called me at the last minute because you needed me to save the evening with some difficult wife who was making your deal complicated. I was part of your career, David. I just wasn't on the payroll. He stared at me, mouth open, caught between responses. I'd never talked to him like this before. I'd never laid out the truth so bluntly, so unapologetically. In the past, I would have softened it, would have added caveats and qualifiers and apologies for speaking so directly. Not anymore. I'm going to take a shower, I said. Try not to bankrupt us before I come back down. I walked upstairs with my head held high, but my hands were shaking by the time I reached the bathroom. I gripped the sink and stared at myself in the mirror, watching the color fade from my cheeks, watching my brave face crumble into something more honest. This was hard. Harder than I'd expected. Every confrontation felt like climbing a mountain, and there were so many more mountains ahead. David would fight me on everything. He would make this divorce as painful as possible, not because he wanted to stay married, but because he wanted to punish me for having the audacity to leave. I showered, dressed, and went to face another day. For the next week, we lived in an uneasy detente. David stayed in the guest room. Tanya didn't come back, though David spent hours on the phone with her every night, his voice alternating between pleading and aggressive. I focused on the divorce proceedings, gathering documents, meeting with Patricia, building my case brick by brick. Then, on the 9th day, my neighbor Ruth knocked on the door. Ruth was 72 years old, widowed, and the kind of woman who knew everything about everyone on the street. She brought baked goods to every new family, attended every block party, and maintained an intelligence network that would make the CIA jealous. Margaret, dear, she said when I opened the door, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Come in. Can I get you some tea? That would be lovely. I led her to the kitchen and put the kettle on while she settled into a chair at the table. She looked around with the practiced eye of a woman cataloging details for later discussion. Is David home? She asked. He's out. Won't be back until this evening. Good. Because what I have to say, well, I thought you should hear it in private. My stomach tightened. What is it? Ruth folded her hands on the table. I was at the grocery store yesterday. You know the one on Maple? The organic place? Anyway, I ran into that young woman, the one with the blonde hair, the one who's been coming around. Tanya. That's the one. She was with some friends, and they were talking quite loudly. I don't think they realized I was in the next aisle. The kettle started to whistle. I poured the water over the tea bags automatically, my mind racing ahead to whatever Ruth was about to tell me. What were they saying? Ruth accepted her tea with a nod of thanks. She was telling her friends that David's wife, you, I presume, had some kind of mental breakdown. That you've been claiming the house is yours when everyone knows it's David's. That he's been too kind to have you committed, but he might have to, if you keep acting out. I set down my own cup before I could drop it. She said, "What?" "I know, dear." I was horrified. I almost said something, but I thought I should tell you first. Find out what's really going on. I took a breath, then another. The kitchen felt very small, suddenly, very bright, very sharp around the edges. "The house is mine, Ruth. I have the deed. I have the legal documents. I've been working with a lawyer for weeks. David knows the truth. He just doesn't want to accept it." Ruth's eyes widened. "You mean he's been lying? To everyone?" "He's been lying to Tanya, and apparently Tanya has been spreading those lies around town." "Oh, Margaret." Ruth reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea things had gotten so bad." "No one did. That's how he wanted it." I found myself telling Ruth everything. The affair, the birthday, the envelope, the standoff. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to sympathy to something that looked almost like admiration. "You've been planning this for years," she said when I finished. 3 years, ever since I first found out about Tanya. "And you never said anything. You just waited." "I didn't know what else to do." He controlled everything. The money, the social circle, the narrative. If I'd left without a plan, he would have destroyed me. Ruth shook her head slowly. "That man. I always thought he was charming, but there was something, I could never put my finger on it. A coldness behind the smile. My grandmother said the same thing. I should have listened." Ruth finished her tea and stood. "I'm going to go now. But Margaret, I want you to know that I believe you. And if there's anything I can do, anything at all, you just say the word." "Thank you, Ruth. Really." She paused at the door. "Do you have the deed? The actual document?" "Of course. Why?" "Because if Tanya is telling people you're delusional, it might help if someone saw proof. Someone who talks as much as I do." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I went to my office, retrieved a copy of the deed, and handed it to her. "I'm trusting you with this." Ruth took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "I won't let you down." She left, and I stood in the doorway watching her walk down the driveway. I didn't know if I'd done the right thing. Ruth was a gossip, and gossip was unpredictable. It could spread the truth or distort it beyond recognition. But I was tired of being silent, tired of letting David control the story. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd play right back. 2 days later, I learned just how dirty he was willing to play. I was meeting with Patricia when her assistant knocked and handed her a folder. Patricia opened it, read the contents, and her face went very still. "What?" I asked. She slid the folder across the desk to me. "David filed a counterclaim this morning. He's alleging that the money used to purchase the house was actually his, a gift from his parents that was mistakenly deposited into your grandmother's trust. That's insane. There's no evidence of that. There doesn't have to be. He just has to make the claim and let the courts sort it out. It's a delay tactic. A good one, actually. This could add months to the proceedings." I stared at the papers, at the legal jargon that reduced my grandmother's legacy to a line item in a property dispute. Can he do that? He can try, but here's the thing. He'll have to prove his claim. And that means he'll have to produce financial records going back 15 years. Records that will show exactly where the money came from. So it'll backfire? Eventually. But in the meantime, the house stays in limbo. Neither of you can sell it, neither of you can leverage it, and you're stuck living together until this gets resolved. I thought about the guest room, about David's sullen presence, about Tanya potentially moving back in while we waited for courts to decide what everyone already knew. How long? 6 months, maybe more, depending on the court calendar. 6 months. 6 more months of this purgatory. I felt the weight of it settle on my shoulders like a physical thing. "There's something else," Patricia said. "In the filing, David makes reference to your erratic behavior and unstable mental state. He's laying groundwork." "Groundwork for what?" "I'm not sure yet, but if I had to guess, I'd say he's going to try to paint you as unfit to manage your own affairs." It won't work. You're obviously competent. But it's another delay tactic, and it's designed to unnerve you. Unnerve me. That was one way to put it. Another way was that my husband of 10 years was trying to have me declared crazy so he could steal my house. What do? Stay calm. Document everything. Don't give him ammunition. Patricia leaned forward. And Margaret, find out what he's hiding. Because men like David don't file claims like this unless they're protecting something bigger. I drove home in a daze. The counterclaim, the mental health accusations, the manufactured delays, it was all so carefully orchestrated, so planned. David had been thinking about this for longer than 3 weeks. Maybe longer than 3 years. What else had he been planning? I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car, staring at the house. My house. My grandmother's gift. The one thing in this marriage that was truly mine. I wasn't going to let him take it. No matter how long it took, no matter how dirty he played, I wasn't going to let him win. I got out of the car, walked inside, and started looking for evidence. It took me 3 hours of searching David's home office, a room he'd kept locked for years but had neglected to secure since the birthday confrontation, to find the first piece of the puzzle. Bank statements. Dozens of them, going back over a year, for an account I'd never seen before. The account was in Tanya's name, and according to the statements, David had been transferring money into it for 14 months. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Small enough to avoid triggers, large enough to add up. The total was just over $50,000. I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by papers, and felt the last illusion of my marriage shatter. This wasn't a man who'd made a mistake, who'd fallen for someone else, who'd handled things badly. This was a man who'd been systematically robbing me for over a year while sleeping down the hall and pretending everything was fine. I gathered the statements, photographed each one with my phone, and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I called Patricia. I found something, I said, and you're not going to believe it. Ruth worked fast. Within a week of our conversation, the narrative on our street had shifted. I'd hear fragments of it at the mailbox, at the grocery store, in the careful way people looked at me now. Not with pity, but with something closer to respect. The crazy wife had become the wronged woman. The delusional claim had become the documented truth. David noticed the change. He came home one evening looking thunderous, his jaw tight, his movements sharp. "What did you tell Ruth?" he demanded. I was sitting on the couch, reading. I didn't look up. I told her the truth. "You showed her the deed." I did. That was private. That was between us. Now I looked up. Between us? You mean like the $50,000 you've been funneling into Tanya's account? Was that between us too? The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was carefully controlled. "I don't know what you think you found, but I found bank statements, David. 14 months of transfers. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That money was mine. I earned it. We're married. It's our money. And you were hiding it from me, moving it into an account in your girlfriend's name." I closed my book and stood. "So please, lecture me more about privacy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on trust and honesty." David's control cracked. "You had no right to go through my things." "I had every right. We're getting divorced, David. Everything is on the table now. And when Patricia presents those bank statements to the court, you're going to have to explain why you've been draining our finances to fund your affair." "Patricia won't. Those statements were in a locked room. They're inadmissible." "The room wasn't locked. Not this week, anyway. And even if the physical statements are inadmissible, we can subpoena the bank records. It's all going to come out." For the first time since my birthday, I saw something like fear in David's eyes. Real fear. Not the performative panic of a man caught in a lie, but the deep, visceral terror of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want a divorce. I want my house. I want you to stop lying to everyone about me being crazy. And I want you to explain to Tanya exactly why she's not going to be getting any more deposits." She's not part of this. She's been part of this for 14 months, according to your own records. But you're right, she's not my problem. She's yours. Figure it out. I walked past him toward the kitchen. I needed tea. I needed something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Margaret, I stopped but didn't turn around. I'll fight you on this. On all of it. You know that, right? I know. And when I win, I turn then, meeting his eyes. You're not going to win, David. You've been so busy planning how to get rid of me that you never stopped to consider what would happen if I planned back. And I've been planning for 3 years. 3 years of watching, documenting, waiting. You don't know the half of what I have. It was a bluff, mostly. I had the bank statements and the property deed and the prenup. I didn't have much else. But David didn't know that, and his face showed it. This isn't over, he said. No, but it will be. He left. I heard his car start, heard the tires screech on the pavement, heard the silence settle back over the house like snow. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table. I cried. Not sad tears, not exactly. These were different. Relief tears, fear tears. The tears of a woman who just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. My phone buzzed. Karen. How are you holding up? I typed back. I confronted him about the money. He knows I know. The phone rang immediately. Tell me everything, Karen said. So I did. The bank statements, the transfers, the look on David's face when he realized I'd found them. Karen listened, making small sounds of outrage and encouragement. What happens now? She asked when I'd finished. Patricia says the statements strengthen our case considerably. They show intent to deceive, which could affect the property settlement. And it makes his claim about my mental state look like what it is. A desperate attempt to discredit me. So that's good, right? It's good for the divorce. But David is going to make my life hell until this is over. He knows I've won, and he's going to make me pay for it. Then you need to document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every nasty look. Build a paper trail. That's what Patricia said. Great minds. I smiled despite myself. Thank you, Karen, for all of this. For believing me. You're my sister. I'll always believe you. We hung up, and I sat with my cooling tea, watching the evening light fade outside the window. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new maneuvers, new attempts by David to regain control. But tonight, I was winning. Tonight, for the first time in years, I was winning. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Collins? This is Janet Rodriguez. I'm a forensic accountant working with Patricia Chen's office. I sat up straighter. Patricia had mentioned bringing in a specialist, but I hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. Yes. Hello. Patricia mentioned you might be calling. I wanted to schedule a meeting to go over the financial documents you've provided. There are some anomalies I'd like to discuss. Anomalies? I'd rather explain in person, if that's all right. Can you come to the office this afternoon? I checked my calendar. Empty, like it had been for years. David had never liked me making plans that didn't revolve around his schedule. I can be there at 2. Perfect. See you then, Mrs. Collins. I spent the morning trying not to speculate about what Janet had found. Anomalies could mean anything. Accounting errors, discrepancies, evidence of fraud. The not knowing was almost worse than the knowing. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was sitting in Patricia's conference room across from Janet Rodriguez, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper manner. Thank you for coming in, Janet said, opening a folder thick with documents. I've been reviewing your husband's financial records, the ones we were able to subpoena from the joint accounts and his personal banking, and I've found some concerning patterns. Concerning how? Janet spread several pages across the table. The transfers to Ms. Tanya Miller's account were just the beginning. Over the past 2 years, your husband has systematically moved nearly $100,000 out of accounts you had access to and into accounts you didn't know existed. I stared at the numbers. $100,000. That was more than I'd feared, more than I'd imagined. How is that possible? I reviewed our statements. He was careful. He created accounts in his name only, then transferred small amounts over time. The statements you saw showed the withdrawals, but they were labeled as business expenses, consulting fees, professional development, client entertainment. Without digging into each individual transaction, it would look legitimate. Patricia leaned forward. This changes things, Margaret, significantly. What David did isn't just hiding assets, it's fraud. And it gives us considerable leverage in the divorce settlement. What kind of leverage? The kind where he agrees to a settlement we dictate or we report him to the state bar for financial misconduct. I felt dizzy. The state bar? But he's not a lawyer. No, but his business involves legal contracts. Financial fraud could cost him his professional licenses, his partnerships, his reputation. Patricia's voice was calm but intense. We have him, Margaret. We have him completely. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick. There's something else, Janet said, her tone shifting slightly. Something I couldn't quite figure out. What? She pulled out another document. This is a loan agreement from 18 months ago. Your husband took out a line of credit for $50,000, secured against real property. What property? We don't own anything except the house. And that's in my name. Exactly. Janet pointed to a line on the document. He secured the loan using your house as collateral. He forged your signature on the application. The room went very quiet. He forged... I couldn't finish the sentence. I've had a document expert review it. The signature on this application is not yours. It's a very good forgery, but there are inconsistencies. Patricia was already on her feet, pacing. This is criminal, Margaret. This isn't divorce court anymore. This is felony fraud. What do I do? We need to talk to the police. File a report. This loan is null and void because it was obtained through fraud, which means the lien on your property is invalid. Patricia stopped pacing and looked at me. But it also means David faces potential prosecution. This is bigger than a divorce now. I thought about David in handcuffs. David in a courtroom facing criminal charges. David's career destroyed. His freedom threatened. I thought about how much I'd loved him once. How much I'd wanted our marriage to work. How hard I'd tried to be the wife he wanted, the partner he deserved. And then I thought about the $100 bill, the guest room, the 14 months of stolen money, the forged signature on a loan that could have cost me my house. File the report, I said. Patricia nodded slowly. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. David will be furious. He's already furious. He's already done everything he could to destroy me. The only difference now is that I'm fighting back. Janet gathered her papers. I'll prepare a full report for the police. It should be ready by tomorrow. Thank you, Janet, for finding this. It's what I do. She paused at the door. Mrs. Collins? For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Men like your husband count on their wives being too scared to fight. They count on silence and shame and fear. The fact that you're standing up to him, that matters. She left, and Patricia and I sat in silence for a long moment. How are you feeling? Patricia asked. Terrified, angry, sad. I laughed weakly. All of the above. That's normal. This is a lot. I never wanted this, you know. I just wanted a divorce, a clean break. I didn't want to destroy him. You're not destroying him. He destroyed himself. You're just refusing to be collateral damage anymore. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through streets I barely knew. I wasn't ready to face the house yet, wasn't ready to potentially face David. I needed time to process, to breathe, to prepare myself for what came next. When I finally pulled into the driveway, Ruth was waiting on my doorstep. Margaret, dear, I'm so glad I caught you. She looked nervous, which was unusual for Ruth. Something happened today. Something I think you should know about. What is it? I was at the community center this morning for my bridge club, and I overheard something. David was there, talking to Margaret Wilson, you know, the one who runs the homeowners association. I know Margaret. Well, He was telling her that you've been unstable, that you've been making wild accusations about him, that you've been threatening him, that he's concerned for his safety. Ruth wrung her hands. He asked if she could help him document incidents for a potential restraining order. The ground shifted under my feet. A restraining order. Against me. He's trying to get me removed from my own house. That's what it sounded like. He's painting himself as the victim, Margaret. Telling everyone you've been aggressive, irrational, that you broke into his office and went through his private papers. I thought about the unlocked door, the bank statements, my certainty that I'd had every right to search for evidence. How would that look to a judge? To a neighborhood that had known David as charming and me as invisible. Thank you for telling me, Ruth. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let him win. I went inside and called Patricia immediately. When I explained what Ruth had told me, Patricia sighed heavily. He's escalating. The fraud report must have spooked him. But we haven't filed it yet. No, but he knows what you know. He's trying to get ahead of the story, establish a counter-narrative before you can act. Can he actually get a restraining order against me? He can try, but restraining orders require evidence of credible threats or harassment. Has he made any recordings of you? Documented any interactions? I thought back over the past week. The confrontations, the arguments, the cold silences. Had I ever threatened him? Had I ever done anything that could be construed as threatening? I don't think so. We've argued, but I would never hurt him. Then his claim should fail. But Margaret, you need to be extremely careful from now on. Don't engage with him unless absolutely necessary. Keep all interactions brief and documented. And whatever you do, don't give him any ammunition. I understand. I mean it. No arguments, no confrontations, no searching through his things. Everything goes through lawyers from here on out, I promised. And we hung up. Then I sat in the quiet of my kitchen and tried to figure out how my life had gotten to this point. David came home late that night. I was already in bed, the master bedroom, my bedroom, when I heard his car in the driveway. I listened to him move through the house below, his footsteps heavy, his presence like a storm cloud pressing against the walls. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my bedroom door. My name was written on it in David's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I know what you're planning. I know about the forensic accountant, the fraud allegations, the police report, and I know how to stop you. There are things about your family, about your grandmother's estate, that you don't know. Things that would change everything. Back off now, while you still can. Or I'll make sure everyone learns the truth about where that money really came from. I read the note 3 times. Each time, my heart beat faster. My grandmother's estate. Things I didn't know. Where the money really came from. He was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. And Grandma Ruth had been the most honest person I'd ever known. Her money had come from decades of careful saving, from Grandpa's pension, from a life of quiet frugality. But the seed of doubt was planted. And David knew exactly how to water it. I called Karen. He's threatening me with something about Grandma's estate, I said, reading her the note. He says there are things I don't know, that it would change everything. Karen was silent for a long moment. Maggie, there's something I should tell you. My blood went cold. What? It's probably nothing. But a few years ago, before Grandma died, I overheard her talking to Mom. They were arguing about something, money, I think, and Grandma said something strange. She said, that money was meant to make things right, and I won't let you touch it. Make things right? What does that mean? I don't know. I asked Mom about it later, and she told me I'd misheard. But Maggie, the way she said it, the way she shut down the conversation, I've always wondered. I thought about my mother, about her strained relationship with Grandma, about the way she'd reacted when she learned I'd inherited the bulk of the estate. She'd been furious. She'd accused Grandma of playing favorites, of punishing her for unnamed sins. I'd always assumed it was jealousy. Simple, petty jealousy. But what if it was something more? I need to find out, I said. I need to know what David knows, or thinks he knows. How? I looked at the note in my hand, at David's careful handwriting, at the threat that lingered between every line. I'm going to ask Mom. It was the last thing I wanted to do. My mother and I had never been close. She'd always favored Karen, always found me too quiet, too dreamy, too much like my grandmother. But if there was a secret about the family money, she would know. And if David was bluffing, she would know that too. I made the call that afternoon. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice guarded. Margaret, this is unexpected. Hi, Mom. I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet? A long pause. Is this about your divorce? Because I don't want to get involved. It's about Grandma, about her estate, about something David said. Another pause, longer this time. When my mother spoke again, her voice had changed, harder, warier. What did he say? He said there are things about where the money came from that I don't know. Things that would change everything. I took a breath. Mom, is there something you're not telling me? Silence stretched across the phone line. I could hear my mother breathing, could almost feel her calculating. Come to dinner on Saturday, she finally said. We'll talk then. Can't you just tell me now? No, this is a conversation we need to have in person. Her voice cracked slightly. And Margaret, don't tell David you're coming. Don't tell anyone. Just come alone. She hung up before I could respond. I sat with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And somehow, David knew about it. 3 more days until Saturday. 3 more days of living with a man who was threatening me with family secrets. 3 more days of wondering what I was about to learn. I made it through by staying busy, by meeting with Patricia, by documenting every interaction with David like she'd instructed. He seemed different since leaving the note. More confident, more smug. Whatever he knew, he was certain it would save him. I was less certain of anything. Saturday came slowly, and then all at once. I drove to my mother's house in the suburbs, a 2-hour trip I'd made countless times as a child. The neighborhood looked the same. Tidy lawns, modest houses, the kind of quiet respectability that hid all manner of dysfunction. My mother was waiting at the door. Come in, she said. We have a lot to talk about. My mother's house smelled like it always had, like lavender and old books and something faintly medicinal. I followed her into the living room, the same room where I'd spent countless childhood afternoons reading while she watched her programs, both of us occupying the same space without really being together. She gestured to the couch. I sat. She remained standing. Tea? She offered. No, I want to know what's going on. My mother sighed and finally settled into the armchair across from me. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her. Thinner, paler, with new lines around her mouth that spoke of stress rather than age. I didn't want to have this conversation, she said. I hoped I'd never have to. But if David knows, if he's threatening you with it... She trailed off, staring at the window. Mom, please. She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Your grandmother's money didn't come from saving, she said. Not all of it. The bulk of it, the money she used to buy your house, came from a settlement. A settlement? What kind of settlement? The kind you get when you've been wronged. When someone has hurt you, and paying money is the only way they know how to make it right. I waited, my heart pounding. Your grandfather, my father, wasn't a good man, Margaret. He was charming in public, successful, well-liked. But at home, she stopped, swallowed. At home, he was cruel. He hurt your grandmother, physically, emotionally, for years. The words hit me like stones. Grandpa Harold, who died when I was 5, who I barely remembered except as a vague warmth and the smell of pipe tobacco. A violent man? I didn't know, I whispered. No one knew. That was the point. She protected him, like women did back then. Protected his reputation, protected the family name, protected everything except herself. But the settlement, when he died, your grandmother found something. Papers. Evidence that he'd been stealing from his business partners for years. She could have gone to the police, could have exposed him posthumously. Instead, She went to the partners directly. She offered them a deal. She'd keep quiet about the theft if they paid her what he'd stolen, plus interest. She called it restitution. I stared at my mother. Grandma blackmailed his business partners? She called it justice. They'd been complicit in other things she knew about, things they didn't want made public. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. My mother's voice was bitter. She got the money, they got their reputations. Everyone pretended Harold had been a saint. How do you know all this? Because I was there when she made the deal. I was 23, just married to your father. I tried to talk her out of it. I thought it was wrong, that she was becoming just as bad as him. We argued. She told me the money would go to her grandchildren someday, that it would be clean by then, that it would make things right. Make things right. The words Karen had overheard. And that's what I inherited, I said slowly. Blackmail money. Restitution money. That's what she called it. My mother leaned forward. Margaret, the men she took that money from, they're dead now too. Their children inherited their businesses. And some of those children might know about the arrangement, might have records, might be willing to make trouble if the story got out. Is that what David is threatening? To expose this? I don't know how he found out. Maybe he did some digging, maybe someone talked. But if he goes public with this, if he tells people that your grandmother's money came from extortion, it could affect your claim to the property. It could open you up to lawsuits. At the very least, it would destroy your grandmother's memory. I sat back, trying to process everything. My grandmother, the woman who'd been my safe harbor throughout childhood, who taught me to garden and to cook and to stand up for myself, that woman had blackmailed her husband's business partners. And yet, she was hurt, I said. For years she was hurt, and no one helped her. No one even knew. That doesn't make what she did right. Maybe not, but it makes it understandable. I met my mother's eyes. Is that why you've always resented me? Because I inherited the money you thought was tainted? My mother's face crumbled. I didn't resent you. I was trying to protect you. I begged her not to give you that money. I told her it would bring you nothing but trouble. But she was so certain. She said you were the only one strong enough to handle it. She said that? She said you reminded her of herself, before Harold broke her. She said you had a spine of steel under all that softness. My mother's voice broke. And I was jealous, Margaret. I admit it. I was jealous that she saw strength in you that she never saw in me. I didn't know what to say. Decades of distance between us. Decades of feeling like I wasn't enough for her. And it had all been rooted in this, in a secret about money and violence and a grandmother's complicated legacy. Does David know all of this? I asked. The details? I don't know what he knows. But if he's using it to threaten you, he knows enough. I thought about the note under my door. Back off now while you still can. He's not going to stop me, I said. I'm not going to let him use this to take my house. Margaret, no, listen to me. I stood up, suddenly filled with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Grandma gave me that money because she trusted me. She knew where it came from, she knew the risk, and she still chose to give it to me. I'm not going to betray that trust by letting David win. But if he goes public, let him. Let everyone know that my grandmother was abused for 20 years and found a way to get justice that no one else would give her. Let them know she was brave and fierce and flawed, like every real person. I'm not ashamed of her, Mom. I'm proud of her. My mother stared at me. Slowly, something shifted in her expression. Something that looked almost like respect. You really are like her, she said quietly. I'm trying to be. I drove home with my mind racing. The truth about my grandmother's money changed things. It gave David leverage, yes. But it also gave me something I hadn't had before. A complete picture. No more shadows, no more secrets. I knew the worst now, and the worst hadn't broken me. When I got home, David's car was in the driveway. I steeled myself and went inside. He was waiting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. How was your mother? He asked. I stopped cold. How did you know I went to see her? I have my sources. He smiled. that cold smile I'd learned to dread. Did she tell you everything? About the money? About your sainted grandmother? She told me. And aren't you devastated? Isn't your whole world falling apart? I looked at him, really looked at him. At the cruel curve of his mouth, the calculation in his eyes, the petty triumph he was so sure he'd earned. No, I said, my world isn't falling apart. My grandmother was a survivor. She did what she had to do to protect herself and her family. And frankly, David, compared to what you've done, the fraud, the forgery, the years of emotional abuse, her sins look pretty minor. His smile flickered. You don't understand what this means. If I go public, go ahead. I walked past him toward the kitchen. Tell everyone. Post it on social media. Call the newspapers. I don't care anymore. You're bluffing. I turned back to face him. I'm not. Here's what I've realized, David. You've been threatening me with secrets and lies for weeks. But the only power those things have is the power I give them. I'm done being afraid of what people might think. I'm done letting you control my story. The courts won't see it that way. When they find out where your money came from, the courts will see documentation of the money's origin, which I'll provide willingly. They'll see a woman who inherited from her grandmother through legitimate legal channels. And they'll see a man who forged his wife's signature on a loan document. I paused, letting that sink in. Which do you think will concern them more? David's face reddened. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. For the first time in 10 years, I know exactly what I'm doing. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. The police report on your loan fraud will be filed Monday. Patricia expects charges by the end of the week. I suggest you find a good criminal defense attorney. I'll destroy you. You've been trying to destroy me for years. It hasn't worked yet. I took a sip of water, amazed at how calm I felt. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to call my lawyer. She's going to be very interested in what I learned today. I walked upstairs, leaving David standing in the living room with his whiskey and his impotent rage. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. My heart was pounding, but my spine was straight. Grandma Ruth would have been proud. The next week was a blur of meetings and phone calls and legal documents. Patricia took the news about my grandmother's money in stride. It's unusual, she said, but not illegal. Your grandmother entered into a private settlement agreement. There's nothing criminal about that. David thinks he can use it against me. He can try. But the documents are old, the parties involved are dead, and frankly, the story makes your grandmother look sympathetic. An abused woman who finally got justice? That's not a scandal. That's a Lifetime movie. I laughed despite myself. I never thought of it that way. Most people won't think badly of her, Margaret. They'll think she was clever. The fraud charges against David were filed as planned. He was served with papers at the house, his face going gray as he read them. He didn't speak to me that day or the next. He packed a bag and moved in with a friend, leaving me alone in the house for the first time since my birthday. I called Ruth to tell her he was gone. Good riddance, she said. That man was poison. He was, but I feel strange, empty. That's normal. You're grieving the marriage, even if you're glad it's over. How do you know so much about this? Ruth was quiet for a moment. My first husband was like David, charming on the outside, cruel on the inside. It took me 15 years to leave him, and another 5 to stop missing him. I didn't know you were married before Harold. Nobody does. That's on purpose. Some stories are better left in the past. I thought about my grandmother, about the secrets she'd kept for decades, about how many women carried those kinds of stories, buried deep where no one could see them. Thank you, Ruth, for everything. Anytime, dear, anytime. The days settled into a new rhythm. I met with Patricia every few days, tracking the progress of both the divorce and the criminal case. David's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal. Apparently, the evidence of forgery was overwhelming, and David didn't want to risk a trial. He'll probably get probation and a fine, Patricia said. First offense, no prior record, and the judge will be lenient. And the divorce? He's being much more cooperative now that he's facing charges. I expect he'll agree to our terms within the month. It felt too easy. After everything, all the threats, all the manipulation, all the careful maneuvering, it felt like David was giving up too quickly. I said as much to Patricia. He's not giving up, she said. He's conserving resources. Criminal defense attorneys are expensive. He can't afford to fight on multiple fronts. So he's conceding the divorce to focus on staying out of prison. But he wanted to hurt me. He wanted to take everything. He did, and he failed. Some men, when they fail, they escalate. Others cut their losses and retreat. Patricia smiled grimly. Consider yourself lucky he's the second type. I wasn't sure I felt lucky. I felt exhausted, raw, hollowed out. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past weeks was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could fix. Karen noticed, of course. She started coming over more often, bringing food, making sure I ate. We'd sit on the back porch and watch the sunset, not talking, just being together. "You're going to be okay," she said one evening. "I know." "Do you?" "Because you don't look like you know." I sighed. I know it intellectually. I know I'm winning. I know David is losing. But somehow, none of it feels real. It feels like I'm watching someone else's life. That's trauma. That's what trauma feels like. I wasn't traumatized. He never hit me. Karen turned to face me fully. "Maggie, trauma isn't just physical. He spent 10 years making you feel worthless, making you doubt your own reality, making you believe you were the problem. That's trauma. Real trauma. And it doesn't just go away because you won a court case." I stared at my hands, at the wedding ring I still hadn't taken off. Force of habit or something deeper? "I don't know who I am without him," I admitted. "That's pathetic, isn't it? I was so proud of myself for fighting back. But now that the fight is almost over, I don't know what comes next." "You figure it out, one day at a time." Karen reached over and squeezed my hand. "And you don't have to do it alone." The final divorce papers came through on a Thursday afternoon. Patricia called to deliver the news. "He signed everything. The house is yours, uncontested. The joint accounts are being divided according to our terms. He's agreed to pay restitution for the money he took. It's over?" "It's over." "Well, the divorce is over. The criminal case will drag on for a few more months, but as far as your marriage is concerned, it's done." I sat down slowly, the phone pressed to my ear. Done. 10 years, and it was done. "Margaret, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm just processing." "Take all the time you need." "And Margaret, congratulations. You did it." After we hung up, I walked through the house. My house. The living room with the white couch I could finally recover in something that wasn't David's idea of sophisticated. The kitchen where I'd eaten so many meals alone. The master bedroom where I'd slept by myself for years, pretending it was normal. I ended up in the backyard, standing in the garden I'd planted the year we moved in. Most of it was overgrown now. David had never liked me spending time on pointless hobbies. But I could see the bones of what it had once been. What it could be again. I pulled out my phone and called Ruth. "It's done," I said. "The divorce is final." "Oh, Margaret, how do you feel?" I looked at the garden, at the weeds and the wildflowers, at the stubborn roses that had survived despite years of neglect. "I feel like starting over." 2 months after the divorce was finalized, David came back, not to the house. The restraining order Patricia had insisted on prevented that. But he started showing up in my peripheral vision. At the grocery store, 3 aisles over, in the parking lot at the bank, sitting in his car, outside the coffee shop where I'd started taking my mornings. Ruth noticed first. "That man is following you," she said over tea one afternoon. "I've seen his car twice this week. He's just trying to intimidate me. Patricia says I should document it, but not engage." "Document it? You should call the police. For sitting in a parking lot? They won't do anything unless he violates the restraining order directly." Ruth shook her head. Worry etched into her features. "I don't like it, Margaret. That man is dangerous." I didn't like it either. But after everything, the fraud charges, the divorce, the public humiliation, I'd expected some kind of backlash. David wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. He needed to feel like he still had power, even if that power was just the ability to make me uncomfortable. I documented each sighting, just like Patricia said. Dates, times, locations. A paper trail in case things escalated. The criminal case was moving slowly. David's lawyer was dragging out every procedural step, trying to push the trial date further and further back. Patricia said this was typical. Defendants with resources often tried to delay in hopes that witnesses' memories would fade or that the prosecution would offer a better deal. "He's going to take a plea eventually," she assured me. "The evidence is too strong. He's just posturing." I wanted to believe her, but every time I saw David's car in my rearview mirror, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. One evening, my mother called. We'd been talking more since our conversation about Grandma. Tentative, careful talks that were slowly building something neither of us had expected. "Margaret, I need to tell you something." I was in the garden, finally starting to clear the weeds. The roses were blooming, red and pink and white, survivors of neglect, just like me. "What is it?" "David came to see me yesterday." I stopped, trowel in hand. "He what?" "He showed up at my door. Said he wanted to talk about you, about the family history, about..." She paused. "He tried to convince me to give a statement against you. He said if I testified that you'd been mentally unstable since childhood, it would help him in his criminal case." "What did you say?" "I told him to go to hell." My mother's voice cracked. "I know I haven't been the best mother, Margaret. I know I've let you down in so many ways. But I will not let that man use me against you. Not now. Not ever." I sank down into the garden bench, tears streaming down my face. "Mom, I'm going to call Patricia in the morning. Tell her what happened. He can't keep doing this." "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm on your side. Finally, for good." After we hung up, I sat in the garden until the sun set and the stars came out. My mother, defending me. My grandmother's legacy, finally understood. Ruth, watching over me like a guardian angel. Karen, steady and true as always. I'd spent so long feeling alone, but I'd never been alone. I'd just been looking in the wrong direction. The next morning, I reported David's visit to my mother to Patricia. She was furious. "This is harassment, clear harassment. He's violating the spirit of the restraining order, if not the letter. What can we do? I'm going to file a motion to have his bail revoked pending trial. If he can't stop himself from contacting your family, he needs to be supervised more closely." The motion was filed that afternoon. David was called before a judge 3 days later. I didn't attend. Patricia said it would only inflame the situation, but she called me immediately after. His bail wasn't revoked, but the judge added new conditions. He's not allowed to contact anyone associated with you, family, friends, neighbors, and he has to surrender his passport. Why his passport? Because I convinced the judge he might be a flight risk. The financial fraud charge is serious enough that he's looking at real prison time now, not just probation. If he runs far. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not well. I wasn't sure I'd sleep well for a long time yet, but better. The walls were closing in on David, and he was running out of moves. But David, as I should have remembered, was never more dangerous than when he was cornered. I was walking to my car after grocery shopping when I saw him. Not in a car, not watching from a distance. Standing right there, 10 feet away, blocking my path. "Margaret." His voice was calm, almost pleasant. "We need to talk. You're not supposed to be here. You're violating the restraining order. The restraining order says I can't come to your house or contact your family. It doesn't say anything about public spaces." He smiled, and it was a smile I'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said he was about to say something cruel. I've been very careful about the exact wording. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police. Go ahead. By the time they get here, we'll be done talking." He took a step closer. "I just want you to know what's coming. Since you've been so determined to destroy me, I thought it was only fair." My finger hovered over the call button. "What do you want?" "I want you to know that I'm not going down alone. Your grandmother's dirty money, your mother's complicity, your own instability. It's all going to come out at trial. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family produced you. Everyone already knows about my grandmother. I told Patricia everything. There's no secret left for you to expose. Is that what you think? David laughed, and there was something unhinged in it, something that made me take a step back. You don't know everything, Margaret. You never did. You think you're so smart with your lawyers and your documentation and your precious prenup, but you missed the biggest piece of the puzzle. What piece? He leaned in closer, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Who do you think told me about your grandmother's money in the first place? I stared at him. What? Think about it. How would I know about a secret settlement from 40 years ago? How would I know what to look for, where to dig? His smile widened. Someone told me, Margaret. Someone who wanted you to suffer almost as much as I did. You're lying. Am I? Ask your mother. Ask her what she told me at your wedding when she'd had too much champagne and couldn't stop talking about how unfair it was that you got all of Ruth's money. My mother, at my wedding. Telling David? No, it couldn't be true. She just defended me. She just said she was on my side. But David saw the doubt in my eyes, and his smile became a grin. There it is. There's that look. The one that says you finally realize you can't trust anyone. He stepped back, spreading his hands. I'm going to prison, probably. You've made sure of that. But at least I'll go, knowing that I broke something in you that won't heal. Get away from me. Already going. He turned and walked toward a car parked across the lot. Not his car. I didn't recognize it. See you in court, Margaret. It's going to be quite a show. I called Patricia from the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. He confronted me in the parking lot. He said my mother told him about the grandmother's money at our wedding. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Margaret, I need you to breathe. Can you do that for me? I'm breathing. How could she? After everything, after saying she was on my side. Margaret, listen to me. David is a manipulator. This is what he does. He takes fragments of truth and twists them into weapons. Your mother might have mentioned something at your wedding, a passing comment, a moment of bitterness. That doesn't mean she betrayed you deliberately. It doesn't mean she's been working against you. But she said she told David to go to hell when he asked her to testify against you. That's what matters. Whatever happened 10 years ago, she's choosing you now. I leaned my head against the steering wheel. Patricia was right. I knew she was right. But David's words were crawling through my brain like worms, eating away at every certainty I'd built. He's trying to isolate you, Patricia continued. That's his last play. If he can make you doubt everyone who loves you, he wins even if he loses the case. Don't let him. I'm trying. Try harder. And Margaret, document this encounter. He technically didn't violate the restraining order. Public spaces are gray area. But this pattern of harassment needs to be on record. That night, I called my mother again, told her what David had said. There was a long silence on the other end. It's true, she finally said. At your wedding, I was upset. I'd had too much to drink, and David was charming, and he was asking questions about the family, and I told him more than I should have. About your grandmother, about the money, about how unfair it all felt. Mom. But Margaret, I swear to you, I had no idea he would use it like this. I thought it was just gossip, just a bitter daughter-in-law venting to her new son-in-law. I never imagined. I know. And I did. Suddenly, clearly, I did. He manipulated you too. That's what he does. He finds weaknesses and exploits them. He made you feel safe, made you feel heard, and then he filed away everything you said for later. I'm so sorry. Don't be, but don't let it destroy you. We can't change what happened. We can only move forward. We talked for another hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years. It wasn't easy. There was too much history, too much pain, but it was a start, a real start. David had tried to drive a wedge between us. Instead, he'd driven us together. The trial date was finally set for 6 weeks out. Patricia said the prosecution was confident. The forged loan documents were damning. The financial records proved intent, and David's recent behavior, the stalking, the harassment, the courtroom manipulations, had not endeared him to the judge. "He's going to be convicted," Patricia said. "The only question is how much time he gets." "What's the range?" "For the forgery and fraud charges combined, he's looking at 2 to 5 years. Given his behavior during the pretrial period, I'd expect the judge to go toward the higher end." 5 years. David in prison for 5 years. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exhausted and sad and ready for this to be over. The night before the trial began, Ruth came over with a bottle of wine and a photo album. "I thought you might want to see these," she said, settling onto the couch beside me. The album was full of pictures of my grandmother. Ruth, young, beautiful, serious, with a baby who must have been my mother. Ruth and Harold at their wedding, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Ruth alone in her garden, years later, looking at the camera with an expression I recognized. The look of a woman who had survived something terrible and come out the other side. "Where did you get these?" "Your grandmother gave them to me years ago. She said she wanted someone to remember who she really was. Not the society wife, not the quiet widow, the fighter." I touched the photo of her in the garden. She was so strong. She was. And so are you. Ruth closed the album and took my hand. "Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courtroom and watch justice be done. Your grandmother would be proud." "I hope so." "I know so." She squeezed my hand. "Now drink your wine and get some sleep. Tomorrow is the beginning of the end." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd imagined something grand, wood paneling and high ceilings and the weight of justice pressing down from above. Instead, it was a modest room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs, and the faint smell of cleaning supplies. David sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his lawyers. He didn't look at me when I came in. He didn't look at anyone. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, his hands clasped in his lap. I took my seat in the gallery, Ruth on one side, Karen on the other. My mother had wanted to come, but Patricia advised against it. David might try to call her as a witness, and it was better if she stayed away. The trial lasted 3 days. I won't describe all of it. Most of it was technical. Financial experts explaining the fraud, document analysts confirming the forgery, bank officials testifying about the unauthorized loans. The prosecution laid out the case methodically, brick by brick, until the wall of evidence was so high David couldn't see over it. His defense was what I expected. He claimed the signatures weren't forged. I must have signed and forgotten. He claimed the money transfers were legitimate business expenses. He claimed I was vindictive, unstable, determined to destroy him because he'd asked for a divorce. None of it stuck. The jury saw through him the same way I'd finally learned to see through him. Charm only works for so long before the truth shines through. On the 3rd day, the jury retired to deliberate. They were back in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I sat very still and watched as David's face crumpled as the reality finally hit him. He was going to prison. His life, as he knew it, was over. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. The prosecution recommended 5 years. David's lawyers pleaded for leniency. First offense, no prior record. The stress of the divorce had made him act out of character. The judge was not moved. "Mr. Collins," she said, looking at David over the rim of her glasses, "you have shown a pattern of deception and manipulation that extends far beyond these specific charges. You attempted to steal your wife's property through forgery. You systematically hid marital assets. And during the pretrial period, you engaged in a campaign of harassment designed to intimidate the victim." David started to speak, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm. "The law is clear about how we treat those who abuse positions of trust," the judge continued. "I am sentencing you to 4 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 3. I hope you use that time to reflect on the choices that brought you here." 4 years, not 5, but close. David was led away in handcuffs, and I watched him go without feeling anything at all. Ruth drove me home. We didn't talk. There was nothing to say. I spent the rest of that day in the garden, pulling weeds, pruning roses, doing the mindless physical work that had always helped me think. By sunset, my hands were dirty, and my back was sore, and my mind was finally blessedly quiet. Karen came over with dinner. We ate on the back porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know. Empty, I guess. Like there's supposed to be something here. Triumph, relief, closure. And instead, there's just nothing." "That's normal. You've been in crisis mode for almost a year. It's going to take time for your body to realize it's over." "Does it feel over to you?" Karen thought about it. "It feels like a chapter ending. Not the whole book, but an important chapter." She turned to look at me. "What comes next?" I'd been thinking about that. In the quiet moments, in the spaces between courtroom sessions and lawyer meetings, I'd been imagining what my life might look like without David's shadow hanging over it. "I want to go back to school," I said. "I never finished my degree. David thought it was a waste of time, but I always wanted to." "What would you study?" "Horticulture, maybe. Landscape design." I gestured at the garden. "Something with plants, something alive." Karen smiled. "I can see that. You'd be good at it." "And I want to travel." "Nothing crazy, just I've never been anywhere by myself. Every trip I took with David was about what he wanted to see, what he wanted to do. I want to go somewhere and make all the choices myself." "Where would you go first?" I closed my eyes and imagined it. A place I'd always wanted to visit, but had never been allowed to suggest. A place that felt like freedom. "Scotland," I said. My grandmother always talked about it. She went there on her honeymoon, the one good memory she had of Harold, she used to say. "I want to see it for myself." "Then you should go." "Yeah." I opened my eyes and looked at the garden, at the roses blooming in the twilight, at the life I was finally starting to build. "I think I will." 6 months later, I stood on a hillside in the Scottish Highlands. The wind was fierce, whipping my hair around my face, carrying the smell of heather and rain and something ancient. Below me, a loch stretched out like a mirror, reflecting the gray sky and the green hills and the cloud shadows moving across the water. I thought about my grandmother, about the young woman she'd been when she came here with Harold, full of hope and illusions that would take years to shatter. About the old woman she'd become, hard and soft in equal measure, carrying secrets that weighed more than anyone knew. I thought about my mother, slowly learning to love me after a lifetime of distance. About Karen, steady and true, waiting for me back home with plans for a business we might start together. A garden design company, using my new skills and her head for numbers. I thought about Ruth, who'd become something like a grandmother herself, checking in every week, offering wisdom I hadn't known I needed. I thought about David, serving his sentence in a gray building somewhere, finally facing consequences for a lifetime of treating people as tools to be used and discarded. And I thought about myself, the woman I'd been, timid, isolated, convinced of her own worthlessness. The woman I was becoming, uncertain still, but growing. Finding my voice, finding my strength. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the loch. Then I sat down on the wet grass, not caring about the mud or the cold, and just breathed. A year ago, I'd been woken up alone on my 35th birthday. My husband had thrown $100 at my feet and told me to get out. Now I was 36. I owned my house, free and clear. I had a degree in horticulture and plans for a business. I had family who loved me, real love, tested and proven. I had a future that belonged entirely to me. I still had the $100 bill. It was framed on my office wall, just like I told Karen I'd do. A reminder of where I started. A reminder of what I survived. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope, sealed, like the one I'd given David on my birthday. Inside was a letter I'd written to my grandmother, a letter she'd never read, telling her everything that had happened, everything I'd learned, everything I'd become. I stood up, walked to the edge of the log, and let the wind take the envelope from my hands. It spun once, twice, 3 times, then caught an updraft and soared out over the water. I watched until it disappeared into the gray distance. "Thank you," I said to the wind, to the water, to my grandmother's memory, for everything. Then I turned and walked back down the hill toward the rest of my life. The bed and breakfast where I was staying had a small garden, overgrown and neglected. The owner, a woman my age named Fiona, had apologized for its state when I checked in. "My mom used to tend it," she'd explained, "but since she passed, I haven't had the heart." On my last morning in Scotland, I woke early and went out to the garden with a cup of tea. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I walked the paths, noting what was salvageable, what needed to go, what could be coaxed back to life with care and patience. Fiona found me there an hour later, on my knees in the dirt, pulling weeds from around a rose bush that hadn't bloomed in years. "What are you doing?" she asked, surprised. "Just tidying up." I sat back on my heels and smiled. "I hope you don't mind." I couldn't resist. "Mind? She stopped, looking at the cleared bed, at the roses already perking up in the morning light. "You've done more in an hour than I managed in 2 years. It's what I do, or what I'm learning to do." I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. "You've got good bones here. This garden just needs someone to pay attention to it." Fiona looked at the roses, then at me. "You're not just talking about the garden, are you?" "Maybe not." We stood together in the early morning light, 2 women on opposite sides of the world, connected by loss and growth and the stubborn will to keep going. "Thank you," Fiona said quietly. "Thank you for letting me dig in the dirt. It's the best therapy I know." I flew home that afternoon. Karen picked me up at the airport, full of questions about Scotland and the trip and whether I'd eaten enough. "You look different," she said as we drove toward my house. Our house, in a way. She'd been staying in the guest room while I was gone, watching over things. Good different? Happy different, like something finally settled into place. She was right, something had settled. The restlessness that had driven me across an ocean had quieted, replaced by something steadier, a sense of purpose, a sense of home. We pulled into the driveway as the sun was setting, painting the sky in the same colors I'd seen over Scotland. The garden was blooming, really blooming now, months of work finally paying off. Roses and lavender and wildflowers, a riot of color and life that would have horrified David with its lack of sophistication. I loved it. I got out of the car and stood there for a moment, just looking. My house, my garden, my life. "Maggie?" Karen was beside me, concerned. "You okay?" "Better than okay." I turned to look at her, this sister who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. "I'm home." She smiled, and together we walked inside. That night, after Karen had gone to bed, I sat in my office and looked at the framed $100 bill on the wall. It was worn now, softened by time and handling, but I could still read the serial number, still see the wrinkles where David had crushed it in his fist before throwing it at my feet. I remembered how I'd felt that morning. The shock, the humiliation, the absolute certainty that my life was over. I remembered picking up the bill, smoothing it out, tucking it in my pocket like a secret. And I remembered the envelope, the one I'd been keeping for weeks, waiting for the right moment, the one that changed everything. I'd spent so long being afraid of David, afraid of being alone, afraid of the truth about my family, afraid of my own strength. But the fear hadn't protected me. It had just kept me small, kept me quiet, kept me in a marriage that was slowly killing me. The envelope had been my first act of courage, the first time I trusted myself more than I trusted his version of reality, and it had led me here, to this house, this garden, this life that was finally, fully mine. I reached over and touched the frame, feeling the cool glass under my fingers. "Thank you," I said to the $100 bill, to David in a strange way, to the woman I'd been who'd been brave enough to plan, even when planning felt hopeless. "Thank you for underestimating me." Then I turned off the light and went to bed. In the morning, there would be work to do. The garden design business was taking off. 3 clients already, with more interested. Karen and I had plans to meet with a small business advisor to start thinking about expansion. My mother was coming for dinner next week, another step in the slow rebuilding of our relationship. Life was moving forward. Life was good. I fell asleep to the sound of wind in the roses, and I dreamed of nothing at all.